Welcome to a special episode of Shine On Policycast. My name is Dries Acke from Solar Power Europe. I'm here at the European Parliament, ready to talk about solar and the next European elections. Well, thank you very much, Niels. We're here in your office. You're a member of the European Parliament for the Social and Democratic Party. Thanks for taking the time to be with us on the Policycast. So, as a first question, could I just ask you, will you be running for re-election, Niels?
I will. Thank you for the invitation here. I will be running again because I think last time we had the climate election, at least in Denmark, I would say the climate and the green transition was very dominant themes. And we did a lot. We took a lot of good steps, I think, but we're clearly not there. I mean, we need to do more also for greening our economy and making ourselves more sustainable. And I hope to be able to contribute to that. That's why I ran in the first place. And I think the job is not done, unfortunately. So whatever I can do to also work on that, I would be eager to. So I'm running again.
Fantastic. And you say that the last election was a climate election. That's how you express it. The green wave was there. There was a lot of climate protests. It is different now. I think everybody knows that. How would you describe the atmosphere in Denmark now going into these elections? What are the topics on people's minds, or what are the elections about this time?
Yeah, so I think looking at Denmark, I think there are at least two dominant themes. The one theme is the green agenda. It's still very much present in people's minds. I've been to debates already in different places in Denmark, and I think the green transition is dominant in another way than the last time, because I think this time it's very much about the agricultural sector. We've seen also here in Brussels protests from farmers that think, some of them perhaps, that the regulation has gone too far or the requirements have gone too far, which is a little bit of a paradox, I think, because as far as I'm concerned, the agricultural sector is the one sector where we have not done so much, actually, when we look at compared to the requirements that we have for green cars or renewable energy or energy efficiency or industrial companies that need to live up to the ETS emissions trading system. We don't have that many requirements, green requirements for the agriculture compared to the other sectors, I would say. But that is so the agriculture is very present in the debates, and I think the debate in Denmark will also be about that. And then the other theme is our security and the geopolitical situation with Russia's illegal war in Ukraine, and what we can do in the EU to support Ukraine, and how much money we should spend, how much should we use the EU budget, should we cooperate more closely on defense in the EU, and what can we do here. So I think that's the other big theme in the Danish electoral campaign.
No, thank you. And maybe just to develop on the agricultural side, because indeed the protests are very clear, the topic is on the agenda. To what extent do we need to think about a new deal for agriculture? Because of course the big agenda still needs to come their way, as you say. Solar actually has a role to play there as well, potentially. We see more and more countries developing agri-solar, which provides a new revenue for farmers as well, gives them the opportunity to use some of their land sustainably with solar panels. Is that on the agenda in Denmark as well? Do people talk about agri-solar? Is the political class aware of this option to bring together the agricultural sector into a Green Deal setting?
That sounds like some interesting perspectives that you're raising here. I don't think that the political debate is very much aware of agri-solar, but I think we do need. I think it's very relevant because we do need to look for alternative income sources for farmers as well. I think that our reaction cannot be to these protests that we say, okay, then we halt the green transition, then we should stop or roll back, as some of my colleagues would have it, the green transition, because we are in a hurry. Obviously, we are not on track to reaching the Paris Agreement's target of 1.5 degrees Celsius maximum temperature rise, and we need to do more, not less, basically. But I think we need to help the farmers. We have a lot of agricultural support in financial support in the EU. It's the biggest budget post on the EU's budget, and I think we should support the farmers, but I think we should link the support to some requirements or conditions, if you will, to say we support the farmers, but we then also require that the farmers reduce emissions, greenhouse gas emissions, but also nutrients and to the water environment, and also pesticide use and so on. And then we need to support them in looking at new types of revenue, like solar.
Sounds like we have a nice new initiative upcoming for the next years. I think that will be important. Maybe looking back at the last years, it's been, of course, quite a turbulent times for Europe in the European Parliament. What could you tell us in terms of your highlights moments or your milestones over the last years? Can you reflect a little bit on that?
So I think the biggest result that I achieved with a lot of colleagues, so it's certainly not only in my good office here, so it's not mine alone at all, but I was involved as rapporteur, lead negotiator on the Energy Efficiency Directive. The directive, the law that says how much we need to reduce energy consumption over the coming years in the European Union, and we reached an ambitious result here. It is part of the Fit for 55 proposals, the proposals that are supposed to make sure that the EU live up to the climate law of reducing 55% greenhouse gas emissions. But it also became this proposal, this directive, Energy Efficiency Directive, also became part of the discussion on how we can reduce gas imports from Russia and other foreign powers with whom we don't share values. So we managed to achieve an ambitious result with a broad majority in the parliament. The Social Democrats, the Conservative Party, EPP, Renew, the Liberals, and also the Greens backing this proposal for reducing by 2030 yearly 100 megatons of oil equivalents. That is more or less the same as the country Spain's energy consumption. So we could live up to this legislation by closing Spain, which we shouldn't do. So we probably all need to do something. But I think that's a great result. I'm proud of it, and I think in the coming time we will see how this needs to be implemented, and we cannot implement it by business as usual politics. So we need to renovate more buildings. We need to have more district heating. We need to have also requirements for industry that we use our waste heat instead of wasting it, then using it to warm up water in district heating systems, for example. And then we need to have more renewable energy. We need to electrify our economy. That's more energy efficient than if you have gas or oil for heating, for example. And here I think solar also plays a very large role together with other sources of renewable
because energy efficiency is also about system efficiency, and that's where a further electrified energy system will help a lot with reducing primary energy and all of that. So do you know how more solar is calculated into the efficiency targets? Is that something that is built into the legislation?
More solar in particular, we don't in the legislation say that we should use solar or wind energy. we don't specify the types, but I using solar energy to create electricity, renewable electricity, will help us live up to this directive, because it's simply more energy efficient than if you use fossil fuels. So there's no doubt that the solar agenda will play into this legislation. So that's why we also need some more solar panels, I'd say.
Exactly. Maybe shifting to another file that was also live in the European Parliament not so long ago, with respect to supply chains and Net Zero Industry Act. You've been following that as well. How can we diversify supply chains? How can we reshore of some of those critical technologies to Europe, or global diversification? What's your perspective on how to do that effectively, in ways that, of course, don't slow us down in the actual deployment? So how do we kind of combine our resilience objectives with our deployment objectives? Do you have any perspective on that?
When it comes to renewable energy, I mean, or you say diversify, you mean the energy consumptions as such that we should,
or the supply chains, basically.
the supply chains.
There is a sense of dependency that we have to avoid, of course. When it comes to solar, most of the solar panels come from China. That needs to be diversified. We need to have a share of that back reshore to Europe. What's the right policy mix, according to you, to achieve that?
So I think in the Net Zero Industry Act, we point at some specific green technologies that we need to make sure that we have production and an industry in Europe, and solar is certainly one of them. We have seen that China has taken up over much of the market when it comes to solar energy, and we've actually started this industry in Europe. So it's not the best development in that respect. So we need to do more. I think we've been naive when it comes to our competition with China, in the sense that we've allowed China to have an industrial policy of also subsidizing and supporting certain sectors, while we have been very reluctant in Europe. We've said, we believe in the free market. The state should not play any role. We should not pick the winners and so on. And that's all very nice, but when you compete with other countries that are actually willing to put their state power behind certain industries and support them, I think we are bound to lose, basically. So I think the Net Zero Industry Act is about pointing out some sectors and say those we need to support. We also need to support them financially. We have raised the targets for how much state aid you can give to these sectors, and we have some targets for how much of the production should actually happen in Europe. And I think that is the right way to go. I also think what we do in the Net Zero Industry Act is that we say when we have projects in Europe, auctions, for example, for energy projects, price should not be the only thing that matters. We should also look at sustainability criteria, and these criteria should play a large role. Where I think that we in Europe are having a good situation when it comes to our competitiveness with other parts of the world, because we are, I would say in general, quite in the forefront here. So I think it's about saying we should not only look at price, but we should also be able, when we decide which products, which manufacturers should get the job done, but we should also be able to say, actually, we can support our industry, our solar industry in Europe financially, and we should not think that that's a completely no-go, because other countries certainly do it, and thus we cannot afford, I think, to be naive and just lose our jobs in industry.
Yeah, exactly, because that's what we hear a lot as a solar industry, that solar manufacturing is a lost cause. Yeah, it's the example of something that was lost before and cannot be retrieved. But then if you think about how important solar actually is for our energy transition, I mean, we've done, of course, the numbers. Very soon, solar will be the main electricity generation source in Europe, like the main one above coal, wind, nuclear, gas. So you wonder, how can we rely so much on solar for our energy economy and then ignore it when we talk about resilience and supply chain diversification?
No, I agree, and I think we should never say that solar, for example, is a lost cause. I mean, I also look at the numbers and see how much solar will provide in the coming years in Europe, and it's massive, and we need solar to make our energy system renewable. So we cannot. I think it's not sustainable for us to say, okay, but that's all produced in China. So and that we just have to live with that. I think the headline for these days, or this time that we live in right now, is independency. That we need to be independent from foreign powers with whom we don't share values, and that means we can trade with all kinds of powers or foreign countries. We can trade with a lot of them, but we cannot be dependent on them. And if you have an industry that we need very much, that is almost completely dominated by another country, that's not a sustainable situation. So I think much of our effort should be about changing that situation.
Absolutely. Yeah. Maybe going back to Denmark, closing. We all know that the energy transition is a big undertaking. The public will need to be supportive of that. There will be a lot of renewables, a lot of solar, a lot of wind. It will become more visible as well. What's your take on public support for the energy transition in Denmark? What do you hear from your constituency on that?
Well, I think the big problem is the NIMBY problem, the not in my backyard. We have adopted a lot of good legislation, I think, on renewable energy, both in the European Union and in my own country, that we need to increase the deployment. But still, we are actually seeing that it is difficult to get the permits for putting up the renewable energy, especially wind energy. And there, solar might have an advantage when it comes to it's less it's less visible, I would say.
Do you see it in Denmark as well, that some of the solar projects have come with less concerns from communities in terms of the development compared to winds, onshore winds?
You know, we have mostly been discussing onshore wind and the problems with onshore wind, that if they're too close to people's houses, some people don't like that. That's also understandable, I think, but I think the problem is that it just takes too long to figure out, should we have this project or not. I mean, we wait years and years in Denmark, and probably also in some other countries, for getting the permits. So I think we need to look at how to make some deadlines for the permits. But solar energy, I was visiting a project in Denmark recently with a community, some farmers who had gone together and invested in a solar project, and they own the project themselves, and it's in Aarhus, my constituency in Denmark, and they really got a lot of local support for this project, and I think could be a way to go forward, that you have these local energy communities. I mean, you cannot do that all the time if it's a very big. We also need some very large scale products. But the more we can do about giving people ownership of their own energy, and this was an example with solar energy that people came together around, and they didn't have opposition to it. They had support because they owned it themselves. And that means that they will also benefit from it themselves. They will earn money on it, and they can also sell the energy if they produce a lot of energy. So I think the local ownership will be key.
Yeah, no, that's also how we think about solar. It's a very versatile technology. Like for the psychology of people, connecting to the bigger energy transition and the bigger Green Deal, if you will. Solar is a very good way of connecting people, and with people can be urban citizens or rural. It can be like in the small towns, farmers. Everybody has some kind of can have a connection with solar, and that changes the mindsets. I think, and like I get something out of this bigger agenda. It connects them a bit more personal.
I agree. I agree.
Yeah. Very good. So maybe to close, do you have anything to share with us in terms of your upcoming election campaign? Anything you want to, any approach you will take, stunts you will do?
I think, from my point of view, I will have an election campaign focusing on the steps I think we need to take in terms of green transition, both when it comes to agriculture that we discussed, but also when it comes to the deployment of more renewable energy and how we can do that together. Not being against it, but taking ownership together. And then for me as a social democrat, I would then add that I think it's very important that we have what I would call a just green transition, so that we make sure that those who are very affluent, that they also contribute, and that it's not those who are very poor that pay the highest price, because then I think, first of all, I don't think that's fair. Second of all, I think it will be very difficult to have a green transition if that's the case, because then we will have protests, and also in some cases legitimate protests. So I think that's what my campaign will focus on, and I hope that we can have such kinds of policies in the upcoming mandate. If I am elected, or if other also good people are elected.
Super. Well, best of luck with your campaign, and we really hope to see you back after the elections.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you for listening to this special episode of the Shine On Policycast. Make sure to get out and use your vote at the next June elections.